When was the last time you made an assumption? And when was the last time the assumption was accurate? Humans make assumptions all of the time. It's part of a thinking trap called jumping to conclusions, which I'm sure you're familiar with that phrase. We make a conclusion or a judgment before having all of the facts or the information about the situation, and it's something that we inherently do because humans are meaning-making machines. We are constantly trying to reason out and rationalize our behavior of others, and situations at large. We do this on the grand scale of, like, what is the meaning of life, to the minutia of everyday tasks and events. We are constantly making assumptions and jumping to conclusions because we don't always have all of the information or can't always get the necessary facts to come to a reasonable conclusion. And we know the age-old adage of assuming makes an ass out of you and me, and of course that still rings true today because it can cause a lot of strife between yourself and your perception of yourself and in your relationships if you're constantly jumping to conclusions and assuming things of others that don't turn out to be true. A way to battle this tendency that every human has is to embody a sense of genuine curiosity and asking curious questions. So instead of assuming that your partner is doing something he or she's not supposed to be doing based off of his or her behavior for the past 20 years of your marriage and jumping to a conclusion about that behavior, you can ask a question instead to seek understanding of the situation. And that curious question is key. And so you might be thinking, oh, well, okay, Mary Kate, aren't all questions curious? Because there's curiosity inherent in the sheer action of asking a question. Of course, that is true, and I'm sure we've all been the recipient of receiving a question where the person's being facetious, or the person's asking a question to further prove their point, or to try and be right, or to catch you in some sort of thing. And so there's a difference between asking a question for the genuine purpose of trying to seek understanding for your knowledge gain, or to, find a solution to a problem or overcome differences, and asking a question for the sake of just wanting to prove your point and be right. And so embodying curiosity and asking those real curious questions can help to clear away all of the mental clout that you create when you're making an assumption. That is something that I have been living each day for the past 3 weeks. My husband and I recently purchased an RV, and so we're living in a 25-foot aluminum box full-time from now until the foreseeable future. And because we've been doing this really new and wild thing together, neither of us have lived in an RV before. We don't know what it was going to be like, and we still don't know exactly what it's going to look like in the future. We're kind of forced to embody that curiosity. And so because we're out of our routines and our ruts of our life back in Syracuse, we're asking each other those curious questions, and instead of making those assumptions about what we're doing or not doing that might cause rub and friction between us and any other couple, we're asking those curious questions to actually try and understand, what's your reason for doing that? Because this thing is so new, we're trying to reason our way through it, but we're doing it together as a unit. And so this novelty and stretching ourselves is allowing us to explore in a genuinely curious way. And with that curiosity present, we're not making assumptions. And so our communication has become much more pleasant and polite. And I don't mean this to be a crash course in couples therapy by any means, but one of the biggest issues, I would say, that couples have is navigating the differences of one another. Especially if you've been with your partner for a long time, you get used to each other, you get used to your behavior, you get in these routines like I mentioned earlier, and so when something doesn't add up to your expectation of the situation, that's when you jump to that conclusion and make that assumption about why your partner is behaving the way that he or she is. And so navigating those differences and making those assumptions is where that rub comes in. Asking those curious questions alleviates all of that strife. If you're coming from a place of genuinely wanting to understand the person, they're going to pick up on that, and those assumptions are just erased. They're sponged out. They're no longer there. And so I invite you to play around with this idea of how can you embody curiosity and integrate more genuine curiosity and understanding into your day-to-day life, whether you're in a routine that you've been in for 20 years with your partner or with yourself or otherwise, or you're trying something new. How can you leverage curiosity to prevent yourself from jumping to conclusions and making those assumptions?